Good morning and welcome to 30 Days of Transformation. Today's bullet points are going to be about yoga and neurobiology. Again, this is my third session about yoga and neuroscience. I'll probably have a couple more. Today's day 13. I missed yesterday. Sorry about that. I had some challenges with technology. I was in Knoxville, and one of the things I wanted to mention is that every time I teach workshops, I kind of travel a little bit and teach some workshops, and almost every time I work with people, and by the way, the people that come to my workshops are really amazing, physicians and PhD scientists and people who have so much to contribute to this conversation. So if you're one of those people that comes to my workshops, thank you so much, because I'm so inspired and humbled to have a chance to work with you. At any rate, what I wanted to say is that every time I teach workshops, the feedback that I very often get is that people often come to yoga thinking that yoga is about asanas, yoga and meditation. How many times have you heard that? Yoga is asana practice and then meditation is something else. But actually the integrated practice of yoga includes the ethical principles, the yamas and niyamas, and then asana practice, which are yoga postures, and then pranayama practice, which is practice for helping to balance the nervous system via the mechanism of the breath. And then the last four limbs of yoga essentially are meditation practices. So yoga is meditation practices, and the yoga postures help us to get to a place where we can meditate in order to be able to transform our mind. There's a lot of great meditation teachers out there right now. Tara Brach and Joe Dispenza, and lots of scientists like Dan Siegel and Richard Davidson, who are meditation practitioners. But what's missing from that equation, for most of the equation, is how do you get the body ready to sit? How do you calm the nervous system enough to be able to sit, to make those transformational practices actually work, actually change the system? And that's why I think the system of yoga is so powerful and needs to be understood in an integrated way, not just in this sort of fitness or this sort of exercise way, which that's fine. Fitness is great. Everybody needs to do it. I love going to the gym, pumping iron and stuff. And it's wonderful, but we have to understand yoga in a different capacity. Yoga is an integrated system for the development of human potential. And it's the birthright of every individual, I think, on this planet to have access to these teachings in order to be able to make those changes that they want to make in their lives. So today's 3 bullet points, I wanted to just give you that little intro, but today's 3 bullet points are going to be about some of these other practices for sure, but how we can utilize the practices of the yamas and niyamas to help us understand, more deeply understand ourselves, and then how we can how we can be a part of a community that helps to reify our sense of identity, how community helps to do that, how we can help other people reify that positive sense of identity as well. So the first bullet point today is about yamas and niyamas and how they are helpful for transformation. So if you're not familiar with these concepts, they're the first 2 limbs of yoga. Yamas are often talked about as something like, the traditional definition is something like abstinences or things that we, sorry, that's wrong. Duties, sometimes I think they say. Like, I don't even know these words because I don't use them very often. But but when we think about yamas, what we want to think about is the most external part of ourselves, and that is the way that we interact with other people. So a more neutral definition of the yamas that I like to use is pro-social behavior, right? So it's like, how do I engage with other people in a way that is sort of creates community, creates kindness, and creates empathy. I also like to call the yamas the principles of empathy, or the neurobiology of empathy. So this is all about connecting. And so there's only, out of the more than 5,000 studies that have been published about the benefits of yoga practice, only one included, it wasn't even entirely about the yamas and niyamas, but it included the yamas and niyamas, only one. And I gave a reference for that study in the notes here. And what the study revealed is that people who practiced the yamas and niyamas, or at least were introduced to the concepts in an integrated setting, they were also practicing asanas, showed reduced salivary cortisol levels. So cortisol is often measured through the saliva, through the tongue, and cortisol is a marker of stress in the system. So reduction of salivary cortisol levels tends to correlate with better stress reduction. So there is some health benefits. Now, we don't have to stay stuck in the yoga research world. Obviously, there are lots of other people that have been researching the benefits of spirituality and the benefits of living a good life, or living with meaning and purpose, or living with a sense of principles. There have been other scientists who have studied that, and the conclusion, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but again and again, the conclusion is, as you live in accordance with values and principles that are life-affirming, you have greater levels of happiness, feelings of meaning and purpose in your life, and more contentment. I mean, it's kind of obvious, don't you think? And what my Indian teachers would say is, without yama and niyama, the rest of the practice, it's really impossible to practice, because if your mind is spinning around with all these, thoughts about, should I do that? Should I not do that? And you don't have a sense of, like, I'm trying to live in a way that's in accordance with my values. That we can, it's difficult to practice, it's difficult to still the mind. So that leads me to the topic of identity. Oh, and by the way, yamas and niyamas, they're, available everywhere. You can find them all over the internet if you're not sure what those principles are, but I also have, I teach about them in my training programs. So the next piece is this idea of identity, and how do the yamas and niyamas lead to identity? So when you have a clear sense of values in your life, and you have a clear understanding of your ethical stance, or your, the way that you want to be in the world, you have that clear intention, then it leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves. So yamas and niyamas are really powerful for helping us to understand who we are. And then as you understand who you are, you have a deeper understanding of how you want to be in the world and what you want to do. So identity, so values help us to reify identity, which then leads us to a greater sense of who we are and what we want to do in the world. And the last piece here is community, because community helps us to be accountable to those values. Like people who, I have a lot of friends and relatives who attend 12-step programs, and lots of people that I know from work also who attend 12-step programs. And one of the reasons 12-step programs is effective for some people is because there's a community to hold you accountable to the, to what you have decided to how you've decided to operationalize your values. So having that community to support you is really powerful. And likewise, when you're part of a community that supports other people, right, there's a lot of power in that. And there's a large body of research that has come out of Duke University, or been compiled via Harold Koenig, who's a professor at the Center for, I think it's called Spirituality and Health at Duke University. And that research demonstrates again and again that people who live in communities, people who have strong religious or spiritual communities, tend to have better health outcomes. And part of that is because the community is holding you accountable, and you are part of that community. You're sort of working together to hold each other accountable. Now, I want to say that I realize there's all sorts of possibilities for exploitation in that, and certainly lots of examples of exploitation. So it's not like it's a perfect closed system, but as human beings, there's definitely evidence that demonstrates that community is useful. And one of the things we know, just in terms of neurobiology, is when we have interactions with other people, that we shift each other's nervous systems. So it makes sense to be trying to shift each other's nervous systems in a positive way, or not, having the intention of having a positive effect through our interactions. Your neurobiology is definitely not a closed system that's just in your body and you don't, isn't affected by everything else. It's constantly being affected by your environment and by the people in your community. So having that intention makes a lot of sense, right? Okay, so that's all my 3 bullet points for today. And so what I would suggest, and I'll put it in the comments for tomorrow, is just choose one of the yamas and niyamas and just kind of choose it randomly. Just choose one of the principles and spend some time thinking about and or meditating on that principle tonight and see how it shows up in your life and how it's relevant for you. And I really love this practice of, sometimes I just like have a sticky note and put it on the fridge to think about for a day or a week, and notice how it's relevant in your life and in the work that you're doing, the personal transformation work that you're doing. So and maybe I'll leave a link to the yamas and niyamas in the comments too. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being here, and leave a comment or a like if you can. Okay, namaste.